So, Richard Gage, it's getting exciting what's happening on the scientific front.
Yeah, it is. And the 700 architects and engineers that I represent are technical and building professionals, not conspiracy theorists. Not that there aren't conspiracies out there. There obviously is a conspiracy. In fact, we know the official story is a conspiracy. Actually, it turns out to be an outrageous one. When you look at the facts, the scientific forensic facts found at the crime scene of the destruction of these three high-rises, you find facts that all seem to line up in support of the theory of explosive controlled demolition. This is science that we're looking at. And so the architects, are, as I mentioned, are first dumbfounded by the free fall acceleration of Building 7. And this is acknowledged by the government, actually.
That's right. At first, NIST denied it, but you guys confronted them, and they have to admit the building did free fall. It wasn't fuel oil. It wasn't Keebler elves. It wasn't structural failure because of bad building. They don't know. And then they made up a magic thermal expansion.
And this thermal expansion is their magic bullet. They first of all, they claim that there are massive fires on floors 12 and 13 during the last couple hours of the building, but the photos and videos show those fires out in that area the last hour and a half of the building, and this is at the area of column 79 under the east penthouse. So this new phenomenon is what they call it thermal expansion because of these massive fires that weren't even there, but they expanded these long span 50-foot beams, pushing the girder off of its seat off of column 79, causing a floor failure, and then 9 floor failures, leaving column 79 unbuckled. So what then happens is an internal cascading and failure of the building a few seconds prior to the overall building coming down. The problem is that would require 400 structural steel connections to fail per second in order, and their model shows actually like sand, just all of these beams just giving up the ghost all of a sudden in all of these columns.
Which is ridiculous in the few, as you know, as an architect and engineer, but for those that don't, there have been a few older buildings where small areas have collapsed under the main structure, and that's how it is. It's not symmetrical. You don't have a building with unsymmetrical fires that couldn't bring it down anyways, magically falling straight down, unless it's, boom, a controlled demolition.
Well, in order to bring a building straight down symmetrically into its own footprint and at freefall acceleration, you have to take out at least the core columns. There's 24 of them within a tenth of a second of each other, precisely timed synchronistically floor by floor. And so the fire doesn't have this level of precision, and people really get that part of it as well.
Exactly. Jawas didn't attack the sand crawler, but we're made to think they did. Only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
Yes. And so the acknowledged, NIST previously actually acknowledged, this is the National Institute for Standards and Technology responsible for the report, they previously acknowledged that if the building did free fall, that would mean there would be no structure. Now they acknowledge the free fall, but they don't acknowledge the implications that those columns had to have been forcibly removed in order to facilitate it.
All right, stay there, Richard. Got to come back. We're going to come back and talk about more of the evidence and all the science building, how you see the crisis coming up in the future of the establishment story. Okay, let's go back to Richard Gage. Richard, we're almost out of time because I want to play the clip of you on Fresno TV, at least part of it, and I want to I'm going to cover some other news before Gerald Salente joins us next hour on the economy. But again, going over the evidence, it's incontrovertible. It's been peer-reviewed. This is really upsetting the debunkers. And I know you've taken a lot of threats and things, and I just want to commend your spirit.
Thank you, Alex. I haven't actually received threats, but
oh, really? I've seen the threats on the web to you.
Well, don't forward them to me. I don't want to see them then.
Okay.
I'm happy in my blissful mission here of educating architects, and I don't actually go to the debunker websites. I don't want to.
But you have gotten a lot of bizarre phone calls and things. I haven't gotten
any phone calls. Nobody really knows my phone number, as a matter of fact, or where I live, which is the way I want it. But we're totally.
I thought I'd talked to you in the past. I thought you said that had happened, but I'm glad I must be thinking of somebody else. But go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to introduce. You brought up the concept of these peer-reviewed papers. Dr. Jones's work is so important here. Several first responders, iron workers, and others have found this molten metal underneath all three high-rise buildings after the collapses. And, in fact, it's pouring out of the side of the South Tower. And it turns out to be molten iron. Dr. Jones has confirmed that this is not melted structural steel. He's confirmed that it has in it the evidence, the chemical evidence of thermite, an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. And not only this molten metal has in it this iron, aluminum, oxygen, fluorine, manganese, but the spheres that you've talked about on your show before are ubiquitous, millions, billions of them throughout the dust samples, and independent scientists with independent samples have confirmed this. In fact, R.J. Lee has confirmed molten iron spheres smaller than a human hair.
Yeah, they put them through these, spectrographs, or what are these different tools that electrons scan, and it all has the exact chemical makeup of the byproducts of thermite. Then they even find thermite chips separately.
Well, that's the big step, and Dr. Jones has found hundreds and hundreds of these chips in the samples, and by weight he estimates that there'd be 9 tons of this unignited thermite, and there's even more ignited thermite spheres, but the unignited thermite chips turn out to be extremely small particles of aluminum and iron oxide and other particles 1,000 times smaller than a human hair.
And then people ask, how could this happen? These were all spook-run buildings. Building 7 was the FBI, CIA, Defense Intelligence, and other agencies' command center. It had the FEMA emergency bunker, the city and county and state emergency bunker, and they had special unconventional insulation put on the pillars a few years before, and then the NIST experts that try to debunk you, they just so happen to be the world-leading experts of just a few dozen, just so happen to be the NASA experts in explosive thermite for cutting through things and for NASA rocket decouplers. Oh, very interesting to have the experts in explosive thermite involved in debunking you.
Yes, and you can read about that, your listeners, on journalof911studies.com. That's a fascinating topic as well. Kevin Ryan exposes this, and the 25-page peer-reviewed paper by Dr. Jones, Niels Harrod, and other scientists document nanothermite. This is extremely high-tech stuff. It is made only in Defense Department contracting laboratories, not in a cave in Afghanistan.
Yeah, it just so happens to match up with what the Defense Department's obsessed with. But, you know, Al-Qaeda got up in the buildings and they got this Defense Department thermite and put it in there. Kind of like Defense Department, super weaponized grade, U.S. patented, miniaturized, coated in bentonite, gets mailed out. They claim Muslims do it, but it turns out the White House is on Cipro, the anthrax-fighting antibiotic, on September 10th, 3.5 weeks before anthrax pops up, and all of Bush's enemies get sent the anthrax, and Congress gets personally shut down, partially shut down, so they can then be under fear to pass the Patriot Act. Again, there's no evidence the government's involved, is there, Mr. Gage?
Well, we're not going to point the finger, but you can. It turns out that Al-Qaeda was clearly unlikely to have access to this stuff as well. They couldn't get access, most likely, to the three.
Al-Qaeda didn't have the NASA explosives. Oh, okay, I thought they got it at Cape Canaveral. I mean, you know, they were Al-Qaeda's got a base at Cape Canaveral.
Nor did they have access to these three of the highly most secure buildings in the United States outside the Pentagon.
You mean Al-Qaeda didn't have keys to the CIA command bunker in Building 7?
Well, they may have been given them, perhaps. I don't know.
You know, that's a wild conspiracy theory. I think it's normal that they snuck in with NASA-grade explosives all over the buildings by themselves and didn't get caught. And, of course, I think it's no big deal that a spook command base, Building 7, blows up like this and falls at free fall. Richard, yeah. I think you're an extremist for even questioning this. Why don't you just believe the story?
I can't. In fact, I'm not even working anymore. I'm earning half the salary working for architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth that I was full-time as an architect, but I don't have time.
That's right. You have built some
anymore.
You built some big buildings, and I mean, you had a pretty successful business. Tell folks about that.
Well, I was managing or helping to manage a $400 million project in Nevada for General Growth, one of the largest mall firms, and this had 1,200 tons of steel framing in 6 malls, basically in a row, and including a mid-rise office space. The steel is up. The developer's bankrupt, and 18 of us were laid off on this project, which turned out to be a blessing because I just didn't have time for it. I was working fewer and fewer hours trying to keep up with my speaking schedule and the research and the marketing effort that we're trying to educate all of the architects and engineers.